Hello everyone,
Hi.
welcome to our second Seals Talk of the Autumn series. I'm Lucy, I'm the Marine Futures intern with the Wildlife Trusts, and this is Georgia.
Hi, I'm Georgia. I am the Marine Conservation Officer at the Northwest Wildlife Trust.
So we're just going to give everyone maybe another minute to get settled, get to your computers, and then we'll start with the talk.
We've got currently about 80 people with us, but there were about 100 people signed up, so we'll just wait a few more minutes.
Fab, I think we're all just about here now. So welcome to this talk. This is going to be the second in a two-part series on seals. So the first part covered the two main species of seals we find in the UK, grey seals and common seals. And it focused a lot on sort of comparing and contrasting their different characteristics, their ecology and habitats, and where you might find them in the UK. This talk is going to be a little bit more of a deep dive into grey seals specifically and into the grey seal colony at Walney Island in South Cumbria. So just a little bit of an overview of the programme for this evening. We'll start by introducing you to grey seals in general, in case you missed the last talk, to a little bit of their ecology and how we identify them, a few of their key habitat characteristics and all that kind of thing. Then we'll talk you through the colony on South Walney, how we monitor that, where it's based, what the South Walney Reserve is like, all that kind of thing. And then we'll talk you through a little bit of the general survey techniques for grey seal surveys, the different stages of pups and how we monitor them, and then some ways that you can get involved too with the grey seals in Cumbria. So I'll just start with this little video. This is a video from the Wildlife Trusts, and it should give you a bit of an overview of grey seals in general as a species. Me and Georgia are going to turn our videos off so that it's full screen, but we'll be back just after the video. So as it mentioned in the video, grey seals are quite a bit larger than common seals. Like the video said, the bulls can grow up to 300 kilograms. And they have parallel nostrils, whereas common seals have more of a V-shaped nostril. And then the other thing that we use to compare the two is that grey seals have quite like a large square head with quite long noses, whereas common seals have a much more rounded head. Like common seals, they live on areas near sort of sandy beaches and rocky outcrops where they can haul out and sort of relax on the beach to have time to digest their food and to rest. But they'll only actually spend around a third of their time on the land doing this, and the rest of the time they go on really long foraging expeditions. They go frequently up to 30 kilometers and can spend several days at sea. And then they seek out these kind of seaweed and kelp forests where they can find things like fish and squid to hunt. We have so many grey seals in the UK. We actually have around 95% of the European population around the British and Irish coast. And then that is also around 40% of the total world population. And you also find them in places like Canada and over on the other side of the Atlantic. This map here shows just a few of the colonies in the UK. Well, it shows most of the colonies in the UK, but just a few of these will also be breeding colonies, and these can vary enormously in how many pups they'll have. So, for example, our colony at South Walney currently has around 3 to 4 pups per year, whereas one of the colonies on the east coast on the Humber called Blakely Point has registered 4,000 pups in one colony this summer. So there is an enormous variety in the types of communities that these seals live in and in how they behave in those communities. Over to you, Georgia.
Right here in Cumbria, and that's at South Walney Nature Reserve. So I'm just going to show you a quick video now of Walney, the reserve.
The island is situated just off the
Sorry,
west
I'll just
coast
restart
of Barrow
it.
and Furness, at the tip of the Furness. Walney Island is situated just off the west coast of Barrow in Furness, at the tip of the Furness Peninsula, close to the Lake District. It is bordered by Morecambe Bay, the Duddon Estuary and the Irish Sea, and it's approximately 10 miles from North End Hawes to South End Hawes, and 1 mile wide at its widest point opposite the town of Barrow in Furness. The large area of coastal sand dunes, shingle beach and salt marsh has long been an important site for wildfowl, waders and migrating birds, and it supports the largest mixed big gull colony in Europe. In 2015, a Cumbrian Wildlife Trust warden counted 2,039 pairs of herring gulls and 3,034 pairs of lesser black-backed gulls. It's also home to the most southerly eider duck breeding colony in Britain. We're at South Walney Nature Reserve, which is on the tip of Walney Island. It's one of Cumbria's few nature reserves that's on the coast. It's historically been really important for its bird life, so breeding gull colonies and waders, and also its vegetation. But one of the more recent conservation success stories has been the grey seal population down here.
So Cumbria Wildlife Trust has brilliant, thanks Lucy. Cumbria Wildlife Trust has managed South Walney Nature Reserve since 1963, and their historical records show that during the 1980s grey seals were seen most commonly alone, but occasionally in pairs around Walney Island. And these sightings were most frequently occurring only in June, August and September. But over time, the population has gradually grown, and there's now a year-round population of grey seals. Just last week, we managed to record 316 grey seals just off using the drone. And we started to monitor the seals more closely in the early 2000s, and that's been thanks to a group of dedicated volunteers. In 2011, 2011, the marine trainees took on this role, and since that project has finished, the conservation apprentices continued the work. It's now being taken on by the new Marine Conservation Officer, that's me, and the Marine Future interns. So we monitor between the months of September and early March. And this is because the spit on South Walney supports a large nesting colony of gulls. And this gull colony is present from around late March to mid-September. And because it lives in really close proximity to the grey seal haul-out site, and we really want to avoid disturbing the breeding gulls, we can only carry out seal surveys between late September and early March. We survey from around half an hour before low tide and half an hour after low tide. And this is going to be when the maximum number of seals are hauled out on the spit. This tends to be fairly early in the morning at the moment. And so we meet early for about a 45-minute walk down to where the seals are. It's a really stunning walk, especially on a nice day, which you can tell by this is a photo I took from a few weeks ago. And here's a little video with a bit more of a taster.
You can see Barrow just in the background over there, and we're just going to be walking down to the end to do a seal survey. So we're about to go through here into the area of the reserve which is closed off to the public. This is because seals are very vulnerable to disturbance from humans and boats, and too much disturbance will cause them to flush and go into the sea, so they don't get as much time to rest and digest their food. This is a problem for the colony as a whole because they don't have time to do that, and also for the pups because they might get abandoned by their mothers. So we've just made this little video to show you how we monitor them and how you can see them on the seal cam. Pups, so the seals are just behind us on the beach here. You might be able to make them out as these little brown lumps. So that we don't disturb them, what we're going to do is come around and crawl up the shingle bank over to the side, and hopefully find a good vantage point where we can watch them and see how many are there, what kind of behaviour they're exhibiting today, how many of the pups are there and how old the pups seem to be, and all kinds of other information we can use to check on the general well-being of the colony. All surveys run for 1 hour. They involve 2 to 3 people, and over the course of an hour the number and behaviour of the seals is recorded in a series of 10-minute intervals. We're looking out for different types of behaviour, so this could include being asleep or relaxed, alert, playing, travelling in the sea, travelling on land, moving from land to sea, moving from sea to land, what we call spy hopping, so that's when they're in the water but pop their heads out to have a look around, as well as sort of guarding, mating or any aggression. We also note down any response to disturbance from boats or anything else that happens during the hour, and also note down whether there are any seals vocalising, which you might be able to just make out in the video shown now.
Picture my mic's on. So you may not have been able to hear the seals then, but if you do go down to South Walney in some of the hides near the shore, you can hear them, and it's a really impressive sound. It's this whole cacophony of the seals chatting away to each other. I'm just going to take you through a few slides showing what we look for in these surveys and how we determine that information. So the first thing that we're trying to find out about the colony is the rough ratio of male to female seals. And this is because it was originally a bit of a sort of bachelor's colony, and there was mostly males there and there were no breeding pairs. But more recently, it's become a breeding colony and there's a lot more females present. So the way we can tell is the males are much larger. They've got much darker skin and they've got a very long, defined nose. Whereas in comparison, the females are smaller, they're quite pale. They'll still have dark speckles on their skin, but they're maybe spread out more. And they've got this less defined, slightly rounder nose. Just a few pictures to show you some examples of the behaviours we're looking for. So this first top photo in the top left is what spy hopping looks like. So this is when the seals are just poking their heads out of the water to have a look around. And this may be in response to them kind of having spotted us and checking if they think we're a threat. But it's also just that they're very curious and very playful animals, and they like to see what's going on both above and below the water. So they'll just be poking their heads out to see what's going on. The second photo on the top right is how we most commonly see the seals on the surveys. So they're relaxed, they're just hanging out, sunbathing on the beach, and this is so that they can digest their food and get some rest time before they go back in the water to hunt again. And then the other three photos are often behaviours that are quite difficult to discriminate between in the field. So we've got a photo here of two seals courting before mating, two seals playing, and this may be like young seals playing with each other in the shore, and two seals fighting. And you'd be surprised from a distance how difficult it actually is to tell the difference between all these different behaviours. So one of the key things that we're trying to do during that hour period of the survey is to really judge the tone of the colony at that time and how they're all behaving. Another thing we really like to look for in these surveys is returning mums. So seals have a very distinct skin pattern. It's a bit like a fingerprint on your skin, and the pattern of the dark speckles on their skin can be used to identify individual seals. So this particular mum that we have photos of here has now been back 4 years in a row and has each year successfully raised a pup, which is a really great sign for the health of the colony and how secure the seals feel in this place as a viable habitat. We do this with a combination of kind of looking in our binoculars, but also using the seal cam footage, taking really good high quality photos whilst we're there to use for ID. And also sometimes you can do this kind of ID on the drone if we have particularly good footage that day. And then, of course, the most important thing, or in my opinion, the most important thing that we're looking for on these surveys is how many pups we're getting each winter and what kind of age those pups are at the point that we go and look for them. So there's some really good, like, detailed information that we have on how we age the pups and what kind of characteristics they're going to show at each age. So George is just going to take you through a few of those stages of the pup's development.
Thanks, Lucy. So stage one is very newly born. So this is sort of between 0 to 2 days old. And you can see from this picture that it's very small, very thin, with baggy skinned body. And they're yellow, often there's a yellow tinge to their white natal fur. You can see often an umbilical cord, and at this stage they're very docile and poorly coordinated. They look very young and sort of very helpless at this stage. But then stage two, he's looking a little bit healthier and a little bit fatter. So this is sort of 3 to 7 days 3 to 7 days old, sorry. They've got a smoother body line and a fewer loose folds. So they've put on quite a bit of weight already. In these first few weeks, they tend to put on at least 1 kilogram a day. So the mother's milk is really high in fat, so they can gain weight really quickly. But during this stage, the neck is still distinguishable, and they're a lot more aware and coordinated. Stage 3, so from about a week old to about 15 days, you can see they've really changed quite a lot. They're very round, put on a lot of weight, and very barrel-shaped body, and with a very thick neck. At this point, there may appear to be some molting, so from the head or the flippers, and they also may be aggressive on approach. So the pups, especially in the early stages, will be very much only found in the high water mark, and this is because they can't swim, and so they've got to stay above that line. At stage 4, between 16 to 20 days, they've still got a round or barrel-shaped body, but they're starting to molt a little bit more from the torso, and becoming a little bit patchy. Their head and the foreflippers have sort of fully molted, and they're going to be much more mobile and aggressive on approach. This means they might not necessarily be quite at that high watermark just all the time, and they can move around a lot more. But stage 5, the final stage, is sort of 18 days to 23 days and above, and this is when they fully molt their short white fur, and they get a speckled coloration. They're very active and mobile, and this is when they actually start to swim and enter the water with their mothers.
So screens catch up. We've just seen a message in the chat saying that some of you are still on stage 1. So hopefully it's showing fine, and it's just your internet is just taking a couple of seconds to catch up. So we'll just pause a minute here. And Robin, I'm hoping Mel might be able to just give you a hand if you're having some tech issues in the webinar as well. While we're waiting, I'll just introduce the next video. So a couple of weeks ago, we went on seal survey to South Walney. It was a beautiful, clear day. It was mine and Danny's first day learning how to do the seal surveys. So this next video is a little bit of a summary from the other Marine Futures intern, Danny, on what we saw that day, how the seals were behaving, and also just a little bit of footage showing how we use the drones and how we later sort of use some software to like use that footage to count the number of seals. Perfect. Robin's caught up, so I'll go to the video.
Danny, I'm the other Marine Futures intern. So we've just finished the seal survey. We saw 3 little white cute pups, and we had about 40 adults there as well. Because of the shingle bank being so dynamic and moving, we didn't get the best vantage point today, so we also took some drone footage, which we're going to head back and look at now. Excitingly, we also managed to see a pie-billed grebe, which was on the nature reserve at the same time, which is a rare bird. It's normally seen primarily in the Americas, so that was a really exciting find to our day as well.
So we've come back to the visitor centre to upload the drone footage so that we can count some of the seals. So we've uploaded the images into some software, and we now can click on all the seals to mark them for us to count them and double check our survey results.
Perfect. So Yes, my mic is on, lovely. So what the drone is really great for is sort of sense checking our survey data. Because of the way the beach moves, and because we have to avoid getting too close to the seals so that we don't disturb them, we quite often don't have the best vantage point to do the survey from. So on some days we'll get a really great steep shingle bank that we can peer over and watch everything that they're doing. And on other days we're sort of lying low in a ditch and just kneeling up and peeking over to do a count every 10 minutes. So on the particular day that Danny was talking about in the video, we only managed to count around 40 seals because we didn't have the best vantage point. But this drone footage later showed that there were actually 107 hauled out on the beach that day. So it's really great for getting a bit of a gauge of how accurate our counting is and what we should use as a sort of adjustment factor or error margin on the days that we're not able to fly the drone because of the weather or because it's too still, so we will be disturbing the seals, or any of those kind of things. If you look on this picture, there's 4 seals that are ringed in red, and these are all the pups that we've seen this year. So as you can see, one of them is way up at the high tide line, and like Georgia said, in their first few days, they're not really mobile, so they stay way up out of the water because they can't swim yet. But these other pups that are sort of further down and closer to the rest of the colony, these are going to be the slightly older pups. They're more mobile. They're able to move, hang out with the colony for a bit, see their mum, and then come back up the shore when the tide comes in because they haven't learned to swim yet. And one definite impression that I think that video with Danny gives is that it's always glorious sunshine, and I just want to reassure you all that that's not the case. These are a couple of photos from when we were out last week, and there was sort of gale force onshore winds and rain, and it's on days like that where it's great because the seals are so much less disturbed by us. For one point, there's a lot of other noise from the wind, so actually we're able to stay there for a lot longer without disturbing the seals. But also it becomes a bit of a challenge keeping hold of all your kit, and especially these nice flappable roll mats that we lie on to stay warm. So that's definitely one challenge of the survey technique. Over to you, Georgia.
So that was a sort of whistle-stop tour of the colony at South Walney, but how can you get involved? Well, you can become a member or make a donation, and you can also visit South Walney Nature Reserve. So although the visitor centre is closed at the moment, the Nature Reserve is still open. There isn't access to the seals or to the part of the reserve where the seals are because of the disturbance that it will cause them. But you are able, it's still an absolutely stunning walk and well worth a visit. And there is a hide where you can get a glimpse of the seals too. It really is stunning down there. So I do recommend going down, even when it might not be quite as blue skies as shown on this picture. It's still worth getting out. You can also watch from the seal cam. So we have the seal cam, which is going all year round. You can see from the picture here that this was a sort of still image taken from the seal cam on the 5th of October with the pup in sight. And you can really see a lot from the seals. So we've even in previous years, it's been captured like some swimming lessons. So for this little pup's taking its first sort of swim with its mother, and that can all be seen from the comfort and warmth of your own home. And you can also stay up to date. So if you sign up to the Living Seas News Northwest e-newsletter, we can send out regular updates, and we regularly update on the seal population at South Walney. So thank you very much for listening. We will be answering some questions. So if you've got any more questions, stick them in the chat.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Georgia. I'll just start with a few that we have in the chat here. So could you explain, Judith's asked, when are the pups typically born, as in what month of the year? And I think these two questions sort of go together. Joe's also asked what stage are this year's pups at? So if you want to give a little explanation there.
Oh, there's a bit of feedback, I think. The pups are usually born the pups at South Walney are usually born in December, so sort of early December. We've had 4 born this year that we've recorded. So the first was early December, or was it late November? Pardon? What did you say? November. Yeah, so they're gone through all their stages. But the newest one was, well, he'll be now a couple of weeks old, so we'll be further along the stage. But they're very, very cute to see. But the actual, for the UK distribution, it's quite interesting because they tend to, they kind of have different timings that usually go in a bit of a clockwise direction. So starting in the southwest down in Cornwall, they'll be born earlier, and then sort of it moves round as they get sort of later in the season.
So we had a question from Jane asking, how do the seals survive winter storms? And I think one of the big things to remember here is that the storm's happening on the surface of the water, but these seals can dive very deep. They can stay in the water for a very long time. It's been recorded that grey seals have been on foraging trips for up to 30 days. So if it's, you know, too chaotic and dangerous for them to be hauled out on the rocks, they'll just be in the sea, and they'll be okay with that. And yeah, the good thing about the pups being born above the tide line is that the pups can just stay up there, relatively safe. Is there anything you want to add to that, Georgia?
I guess just the amount of blubber that they have. They can obviously stay pretty warm in any sort of conditions, and I think if they are hauled out, they'll tend to be a bit closer together, just as sort of one group.
So David asked, how do you tell male from female pups? Do you want to answer that one, Georgia, or do you want me to?
Well, the simple answer to that is that you can't. It's a bit too early to be able to tell. Especially even in a large adult colony, it can be quite difficult to distinguish between adults if you've got a whole sort of group jam-packed together. So with the pups, it's just a bit too early to tell at this stage.
The sort of behavioural things that we want to know of whether it's a mostly male or female colony aren't too important when they're at the pup stage, so it can sort of be male, female and juvenile as the categories that we're looking at, because if they're pups they're not going to be breeding, so it doesn't affect the colony behaviour all that much.
Marion has asked, what is the gestation period? And so interestingly, that's got a 9-month gestation period, but there's actually a 3-month delayed implantation period. So seals will mate as soon as they've basically sort of given birth and weaned the pup. But then because of this 3-month delay, they give birth at the same time each year. And often mums and pups will return to the same haul out site to give birth.
There was one, so Rachel asked, it's great to see that the colony size is increasing, and why do we think this has happened? So there's a lot of different reasons that the colony could be increasing. Grey seals across the UK are actually doing really well, and this is due to a lot of different conservation efforts. It's due to more marine conservation zones and greater controls on disturbance and that kind of thing. So when you visit South Walney and you don't go in the bits you're not allowed, that's helping seals, because that's giving them the space they need just to rest and grow. Another reason we think it may be growing is because of the Walney wind farm. Wind farms, though there's pros and cons to them conservation wise, they create sort of reef-like zones where seaweed will grow and there'll be lots of fish, and it really increases like the biological productivity of an area. So one of the reasons that the seal colony may have increased is because the seals can forage within the wind farm more than they would have been able to in open sea. Is there anything you want to add to that one, Georgia?
No, I think that was well answered. Oh, go on.
So I was going to say, we had another question. Are the seals bothered by the drone? Do you want to take that one, Georgia?
Yep, I was about to read that out. So that's from Diane, thank you. They can be very noisy and annoying, you are right. But we fly the drone very carefully. We've got all the right licenses, and we make sure it's, I'm not actually sure what the height is, but we fly it at a safe distance above that doesn't disturb the seals. Certainly, if an unlicensed drone was to fly close to the seals, it would cause huge amounts of disturbance, and you'd see a lot of flushing into the water. But the way we fly it and monitor it on calm days when we can take the drone up, it doesn't cause any disturbance. We're very careful to make sure that doesn't happen.
Trying to find it again, but asking, oh, I've lost it now. Oh, so yes, so which hide can you see the seals from, and which time is best to see the seals? So from South Walney, there's a lighthouse, and if you're going from the lighthouse out towards the sea, sort of away from the wind farm, so north towards the sea, there's a hide up on the shore there just by the fence, and at low tide you can quite often see across to some of the seals, but they'll sort of be on the corner, so they may be round the corner, in which case leave them be. They may be around the side that we can see, in which case bring your binoculars, and they're very fun to watch.
Anthony has a question here, saying how long does it take the pups to adjust to being on their own once they have been weaned? They are fairly independent. I don't know, I can't go into too much detail here, but they are fairly independent as soon as they have been weaned. There will be, as you can see from that sort of swimming lessons, some time where they will have sort of more interaction with their mother to learn off them, but they're generally pretty independent straight away.
Fab. Sorry, I'm just sorting through the ones we've answered and the ones that we haven't. So another question from Kevin was, does the female leave the colony to give birth? And correct me if I'm wrong on this one, Georgia, I'm not the expert, but the females give birth within the colony, but just above the tide line. But the colony isn't really a fixed space. It's sort of across the whole beach. They'll haul out in different places. So it's more that the females will make sure they give birth above the tide line, and actually they'll all haul out all over the place as the tide changes and as they come in and out.
Yeah.
Oh, lost Georgia's camera.
Yeah, that's correct, Lucy.
Fab. I don't know if you know the answer to this one, Georgia, so no pressure, but Gordon asks, do different types of seal colonies mix in the UK? So that's, do common seal colonies and harbour seal colonies mix? Sorry, common and harbour is the same thing. Common and grey seal colonies.
I think you get times where there is a little bit of mixing. I don't think it's often. We have in Cumbria occasionally found a common seal pup sort of stranded at Walney, and there was a seal, I think it could be 2016, but I could be wrong. There was a bit of a rescue for a common seal pup that had obviously been sort of washed away from its colony and ended up at South Walney. But there is occasional little bit of mixing, but I think in general they keep in different colonies. It's just there might be two colonies fairly close in some parts of the UK.
Fab. I see a question from Kirsty saying there's a single seal joining them when they swim in the sea near Morecambe. That's very exciting. I'm very jealous of you.
Yeah.
I would say a note, keep your distance. If they come to you, then they're very curious and that's wonderful, but they can become defensive if they feel threatened. So enjoy it from a safe distance. They said it looks like a common seal, but she's wondering how far seals travel from their haul out site. So Georgia, do you want to take this one? Or I'm happy to, either way.
You go for it if you.
Okay. So this varies a lot from species to species. Common seals tend to stay a lot closer to their haul out site. I don't know exact distances, but they'll be going sort of 10, 15, maybe 20k from their haul out site to feed. Whereas grey seals are much further ranging. And if you look at a map, if you Googled a map of like grey seal foraging range, you can see that they go from the UK sort of all over the North Sea and the Irish Sea, and there's a lot further travel. So it would be very likely that they would have swum away from their haul out site and be wherever you're swimming.
Nice. Yeah. I think they can sort of go grey seals up to sort of 50 kilometers from their haul out site and foraging. Whilst foraging. So yeah.
There's another question. Do the Walney pups have any predators? Georgia, do you want to answer this one? At Walney.
At Walney. No, there aren't any sort of immediate predators. There would be taken in other parts of the world by sort of orcas and sharks, but we're not going to find those off of Walney. So there are no natural predators, and as they're protected, obviously there used to be seal culling, but that stopped in the late 80s. That's a bit of a guess. I'm sorry if that's wrong. So no, there are no predators.
I guess leading on from seal culling, a couple of different people have asked if we experience conflicts with the local fishermen for seal conservation. Do you want to answer that one, Georgia?
I don't think there is that much conflict, but I'm probably not the best place to answer that. I don't think there is too much conflict in this area. I think the colony as it is, although it's increased massively, which is really positive, it's still not, I guess, big enough to come into conflict with fishermen.
Yeah, and there's sort of a net gain with the wind farms for the fishing stock as well. The general fish population in the area has increased, which is great for fishermen and great for seals, and it's they sort of coexist quite well, I think. So how does the grey seal population compare with the common seal population? Georgia? I think that's like size in the UK.
In the UK, so the UK has a lot more grey seals, but yeah, as sort of Lucy mentioned at the beginning, we have 40% of the world's population, whereas for common seal we have only 5% of the world's population. We've got about 33,000 seals in the UK, that's common seals, whereas grey seals, we've got over 160,000 dotted around the UK. So there's a lot more, within the UK of grey seals. They're kind of distributed in fairly similar sort of locations. The common seal has a few on the sort of east coast, and then around Blakeney Point, and then further north on the northwest of Scotland. Whereas the grey seal, as you sort of saw from the slide that Lucy had up earlier, it's kind of, there's a few more dotted around the UK.
Mm-hmm. A bit of a technical question, so as the engineer I'll answer it. How do we power the webcams? The seal cam is this sort of enormous lamppost type structure, so I think it's probably wired to mains, or maybe solar powered. I don't know why I'm answering it because I don't know the answer. But it's sort of one fixed structure that has its own power supply. Do you know how we power it, Georgia?
I think it's solar power, I think.
Fab. Georgia, I don't know if you know the answer to this one. I'm not entirely sure. Does the mother feed during the nursing period, and what do they eat? No pressure if you don't know it, it's okay.
The mother will still go out to feed during the nursing period. And then they eat their sort of usual diet of fish, shrimp, squid, anything they kind of can find, really. So but they will still go out. They won't go out for such long, obviously, foraging trips, but they will go back into the water to feed during the pup, whilst the pup is in its early stages still.
Yeah, one of the reasons they have such a thick fur is that they're not having their mother there as warmth all the time. You know, they're left up on the tide line, sort of cozy and warm, and usually asleep. And the mum will come back to them after feeding.
You can sometimes hear them sort of cry out for their mum, which is both very cute, but also you feel a bit sad for them.
It's heartbreaking. Do the seals sleep when they're out at sea? And is that a different sleep compared to when they're hauled out? Do you know the answer to that one, Georgia?
I don't know. That's a good question. That's a very good question that unfortunately I can't answer, sorry.
We'll do some research, and that might be a topic of a future Wildlife Wednesday social media post.
I would assume not, but don't take that for gospel.
Fab. And then I think there's still quite a few questions, but we'll just take like 2 or 3 more. So Lauren asks, do they mate for life, or do partners vary from year to year? Georgia, do you want to take that one?
They don't mate for life. Their partners will vary from year to year. And there'll be a lot of fighting between males over the females as well. So it can get quite sort of aggressive. And as Lucy mentioned, sometimes you kind of not quite sure what behavior is classed as sort of aggressive or sort of playful. It can be quite hard to distinguish.
Yeah, and there's in other areas and with some seal species, there's sort of a pattern of like a male will be like a beach keeper and will have sort of harem of females. That's not what we see at South Walney. At South Walney, there's a lot of males, and therefore there's quite a lot of fighting when we go and watch sometimes. But there's quite often a pattern of like one male and lots of females, or quite a mixed colony as we have at Walney.
Judith's
Georgia, go.
Judith's pups play with each other, and some behaviour that has been seen actually on seal cam is kind of almost a nursery type behaviour. So there'll be sort of a group of the young pups with one sort of mum or adult looking after them all. So it's kind of often, not always, but often they will sort of group together at least.
And do they remain in the colony all year or only during the breeding season? I don't know the answer to that, but Georgia, do you?
Yes, they do remain in the colony all year. They'll tend to take sort of longer foraging trips at certain times of the year, but they'll sort of keep returning to the same haul out site to rest and digest. Obviously, we're not able to sort of monitor them during that season with the breeding gulls, but they are still there and still using that haul out site.
And then I suppose one last question, unless there's any others that you've spotted, Georgia, that you'd like to answer. Why do they give birth in the winter and not the summer? Georgia, do you want to go on, or I'm happy to hazard a guess?
You've stumped me. I don't know that one.
Yeah, I think it's probably partly to do with the sort of seasonality of the sort of food availability. But that's just a guess. I would guess there's times of year when they want to feed as much as they can, and times of year when they can stay ashore and breed. But I don't know if Georgia, that sounds reasonable to you?
It's plausible.
It's another one to research, and we may be able to tell you about it another day.
If there are any questions that we haven't been able to answer and that you would like answering, we are more than happy to answer them. You can also, if you send me an email at georgiadjc@cumbriawildlifetrust.org, then, or .uk, sorry, then yeah, if we haven't covered anything that you do want to know, more than happy to answer any other extra queries.
Fab.
But
in that case, should we wrap up?
Yeah, thank you everyone for joining on your Monday evening, and we hope we've shed some insight into the colony at Walney and how we go about monitoring them.
Yeah, all the best. See you at a future webinar.
Fab. Thank you everyone.